Yo, what's going on everybody? It's Jay the Great here, back with another Naruto video here today. Today I got my good friend Batman here with me as well.
What's good, guys? Hello.
Today we got a very interesting video for you guys. Itachi Uchiha and Minato Namikaze are arguably the two greatest prodigal figures Konoha and the shinobi world have ever seen. Hence, naturally, both have many parallels as a result, with both being compared to literal Hokage during their youth, both holding the number 1 and 2 positions of the highest exam scores in history, and both of course displaying godlike power and ability in comparison to their peers right from the commencement of their respective shinobi careers. Additionally, as a result, Minato versus Itachi has been one of the most debated and contentious topics within the Naruto fandom for well over a decade now. So in today's video, we'll be matching up different versions of Itachi and Minato in congruent points in their shinobi careers to give a more overall in-depth look of how these two legendary shinobi compare to each other.
Oh shit, here we go again.
To jump straight into it, starting off with Kid Itachi versus Kid Minato, this matchup easily involves the most obscure versions of these two shinobi that will be discussed due to lack of history on them respectively. Kid Itachi was already widely known as a generational talent, being stated to have wisdom comparable to that of a Hokage, and being shown combating Anbu level shinobi alongside Shisui, as well as it being stated that Itachi was competitive against Shisui during their youth, having a losing but respectable record of 11-24 against him when they once sparred for multiple rounds without the use of their Sharingan. What makes this considerably impressive is the fact that it is stated and implied that Shisui is the strongest within the Uchiha, or at least the most talented at that time in history, with Shisui only a couple years later being capable of defeating Danzo prior to being off-guarded via Izanagi and instilling fear and jonin of other enemy nations as well. Hence, Shisui was already arguably at a low Kage level, especially when considering Danzo was once a rival of 3rd Hokage himself, being considered for the position of Hokage. Hence, with all that being said, Kid Itachi was already at a jonin level, all while barely approaching his teenage years before ever even gaining his MS. But yeah, did you want to get into Kid Minato scaling and how impressive he was?
Yeah, so for Kid Minato in particular within Naruto, so like for his scaling that we have basically at the bare minimum is we see him like at least stated within the manga that he was able to save Kushina, from Baiting Nation that were trying to take her. I think it was to utilize her as the Jinchuriki and, to cause issues in that route. And basically, like, they were dealt with and that's it. Like, it's very vague information. We don't have really anything more. The anime kind of elaborates on that a little bit further and basically shows Minato, like, sneaking up on them and kind of one-tapping them and using stealth and taijutsu as a combination. And then he's able to save her, and the same result is basically shown and emphasized. But the problem here with Kid Minato is that's basically all we have. Other than that, you could potentially argue that like he had a really high, he had the best scores, like maybe even around like that time at that age. But regardless, at least for physical feats, at least for jutsu, or his capacity as a ninja, there was basically nothing more said.
Right.
Even Kushina, as stated in the manga and within the anime, she didn't really think that much of Minato either. Like, because when he said he wanted to be Hokage, she kind of just laughed at him and thought like, okay, whatever, and that was basically that. So again, for Kid Minato, it's really hard to gauge, unfortunately, and in comparison to Kid Itachi, he just has so much shown and demonstrated, and as explained and emphasized by Jay, where unfortunately it's just not fair. Like, sure, like to give Minato even more praise, like he is like one tapping a bunch of high level jonin ninja, right? Like if anything, they could probably be Anbu level, from that nation, but they weren't wearing masks. That's the problem, at least shown in the anime. So I won't say they were Anbu, but at the end of the day, it just makes a lot more sense logically that they're going to send probably the best of their best jonin to be able to secretly invade Konoha, like a rival nation, and to take her as a Jinchuriki and cause problems. It wouldn't make any sense to just send weak ninja, right? Like that doesn't make sense at all. Like politically, just everything, because they're basically committing a war offense, So like overall, like just with that being said, sure, like he's defeating jonin, but like he's not really defeating them, if that makes sense, right? Because if he was truly capable of actually defeating them all at the same time, or whatever the case may be, then he would just confront them. The fact that he has to use tactics kind of demonstrates that it'd either be too risky or clearly there'd be relativity or whatever, and then he'd be put at a disadvantage, things like that. And Minato's very intelligent, very smart, So like overall, it just unfortunately just doesn't look good for him.
Yeah, so like Batman said, Kid Minato has very minimal documented history. Hence, the best we can deduce is that he was at a high tuning to maybe low joning level. As like Batman said, he didn't quote unquote confront them per se, more so stealthily killed them, implying challenge if he were to do so. And again, with that being the case, claiming that he's at an elite jonin level, let alone a low Kage level, is a far stretch to say the least. Hence, with that being said, Kid Itachi would be too dominant physically more than likely and skill-wise for Kid Minato, most likely being defeated in a hand-to-hand encounter, especially considering Minato has yet to master the Flying Raijin or the Rasengan at this point in his career, as those would be very prominent in his arsenal later on. Not to mention Itachi is already capable of utilizing effective generic genjutsu as well to play tricks on Minato via illusions, which would lead to possibly a fatal error for Minato when combating Itachi. So while Itachi and Minato are both generational talents, Kid Itachi takes the edge here with superior documented feats and statements, with his arsenal simply being superior as well, with us agreeing that he wins a comfortable 8 to 9 times out of 10 here.
And not only that, like just to throw like one last extra thing too, we're not BSing or anything, guys. When Itachi was a kid, Kishimoto gave that man all the love, bro, all the glorification, everything. Like he was like the next level prodigy ninja. Like he was even like having a legendary Sonic like Orochimaru shook, like from just how talented and how like just amazing his prowess was as a ninja. Like there was a moment where he's using his Sharingan and basically training and whatnot, and Orochimaru was like, oh, he's gonna die if he does that, not even I could do that, and he does it. He accomplishes the impossible, and Orochimaru is like, this guy. Like the demonstration levels and emphasis levels of Itachi just being him at that point in time was just on a whole other level, and Kid Minato at that point in time just did not have any praise, nothing at all.
To
he
that
wasn't
level,
really becoming relevant until like Teen or Okage or Yellow Flash.
Yeah, that level of like lore and just glaze straight out, it was not even comparable. And then we see hears and say he has a wisdom of a Hokage and he's like a little kid, he's saving his mom from falling debris. Like the guy's on another level of glaze and just overall lore at that point in comparison to Minato. But there you guys have that one. Next up, we got certainly a more interesting matchup in pre-teen 3 Tomoe Itachi versus teenage Minato. So no, Itachi doesn't have the MS yet here. So now, while we don't see 3 Tomoe Itachi too much empirically speaking, we do know that he was in the Anbu at this time, having a lasting impression on someone as powerful as Parlon Kakashi, with him still being shell-shocked at the idea of 3 Tomoe pre-teen Itachi's power when confronting Itachi and Kisame in Part 1, stating that Itachi was only displaying a fraction of his power, even with his dominant performance over the Leaf Jonin. Additionally, around this point in his career, he was already a widely known Anbu, being hand-chosen by Danzo to work directly under him as well as being worthy of reporting directly to the third Hokage in their eyes as well. This indicates that at this point, even prior to attaining the MS, Itachi was already one of the most powerful shinobi in Konoha, being only beneath a select few shinobi such as Hiruzen himself and Shishui. But did you want to get into Teenage Minato scaling and how powerful he was?
Yeah, absolutely. So Minato, at this point in time within the narrative, he was definitely no slouch either. For basically the best feats and statements and information we have regarding Minato within Naruto, or at least within the one-shot manga, is basically his jutsu prowess and his capability as a ninja with jutsu alone. We don't really get any physical feats with Minato, but we mainly get a big emphasis of what he's truly capable of with ninjutsu. And the first thing is seeing Flying Raijin, where he's able to time teleportation jutsu against 2 Biju bombs from the 4 and 5 tails. Yep. And Jiraiya told him to basically activate the Flying Raijin, and then they basically get away and the day is saved. And that's the first moment we see of Minato being able to basically escape and survive a tail beast encounter, which is really impressive. Something that not even a Sonic Jiraiya was even capable of doing at that point in time. If he was, then he would have just simply done the job itself and there would have been any problems, right? He asked Minato to do that for him. So that is very impressive as well. And then as later on as we see where from him observing the tail beast bombs, he wanted to have a way to be able to combat the tail beast bombs in a combative way, right? With ninjutsu, instead of for defensive measures, he wanted to be able to combat it in an offensive measure. That was kind of the whole narrative and plot point of everything and whatnot. So as we get further into it, he basically trains very intensively and he acquires the Rising Dawn. And then eventually he has this little showdown with Kushina to where she overpowers him. Well, he wasn't actually trying to fight Kushina or really hurt her or anything due to their nature of their relationship. But as things progress, basically Kushina stabs through his body, you know what I mean? So he's taken severe physical damage. He's more than likely poisoned as well, as we know how the Four Tails works of when it struck Sakura and it stayed in and whatnot. So he's poisoned, he's struck physically, almost critical fatal blow. And then he eventually goes into like that realm to where he combats the Nine Tails, right? And basically there is like statements that do describe that realm to an extent of how it operates and so on and so forth. And basically from what we get is the individuals that are fighting within it are not necessarily at their max capability, but it's just enough to where they're still able to fight, right? And I mean, it's kind of fair game both ends. So it's applying to the Nine Tails and to the ninja himself that is in that astral place. And basically he combats the Nine Tails with his Rising Dawn against the Tail Beast Bomb. And it's pretty impressive because it is the same size Tail Beast Bomb that the Nine Tails actually shoots against Hashirama. And this is also the full power Nine Tails. It's not split in half at this point either. So he does combat the Tail Beast Bomb with a Rising Dawn that he just acquired, fatigued and severely hurt, and on top of it poisoned. But Kushina is also restraining the Nine Tails with the chains and whatnot, and basically it's enough to where he's able to just have a little DBZ clash. Overall, his jutsu capability is insane. It's like next level, blatantly Nine Tails level at that point in time. And the Nine Tails even states like his ceiling capacity is like up there on the level of someone like Hashirama. Like his ceiling jutsu was that
insane.
Fearful, which is insane. So like again, like when it comes to his jutsu capacity, this guy is a menace. Like he is a demon. It's crazy what he's able to do with the Rising Dawn, ceiling, and even the Flying Raijin for defensive measures. The only problem with Minato though is even though he has great jutsu feats, he has literally no physical feats. Not with speed, not with combat, like not going blow for blow with any ninja. There is none of that at this point in time. And you can't really count like him moving to slam his Rising Dawn into the Nine Tails because Kushina had the Nine Tails restrained with the chains. Like he couldn't move. He couldn't go near it, right?
Yeah.
And so he just slams his Rising Dawn into the Biju Bomb. It's not like he's moving at the same time as the Nine Tails or any of that, whatever, blah, blah, right? Because then that'll be a different story, okay? Then at that point, he's over here replicating feats that he did as an Hokage against the Nine Tails, So, which doesn't really make sense either. Overall, that's kind of the problem, while Itachi, again, does have the physical feats. It just comes to basically a matter of like, what's more better, jutsu feats or physical prowess, to where the jutsu feats basically become non-void and it can't be utilized. Right. If he can't land the attack on Itachi, does it really matter if his ceiling or Rising Dawn is Nine Tails level or even up there with someone like Hashirama and things like that, or his teleportation being able to dodge Biju bombs? Like, does it really matter, right? Yeah. And then at this point in time, we don't even know Minato's stamina or chakra reserve capability, so we can only really go off basically what he performs as an Hokage in the Yellow Flash. And it's decent, right? Like from his stamina and chakra reserves, he's decently able to go for a good amount of time, but not extensively like Naruto or anything like that. It's not crazy like Naruto or Nagato. It's pretty similar to people like Kakashi or Itachi, where his chakra and stamina reserves are just enough, but not like a ridiculous amount, to where he can just drag fights or the sky's the limit.
Yeah, so like Batman alluded to, Teenage Minato is an interesting shinobi to power scale, to say the least. With the Minato one-shot, the sort of lore and esteem in which he is held, power scaling-wise, changed quite significantly. Like Batman said, we see Minato utilize the Flying Raijin, reacting to perfect Jinchurikis and their tailed beast forms, as well as master the Rasengan in basically a single day, which is wildly impressive. However, the single most impressive feat is his performance against Kurama, where he even gains the respect of him, with him saying his ceiling jutsu, like Batman said, is on the level of the literal goddess shinobi himself, Hashirama Senju. So with all that being said, Minato is certainly at a elite jonin to possibly low Kage level at this point in his career, having quite the arsenal already, as well as a physical ability. Now, in a battle against Itachi, obviously the greatest threat to him would be the Genjutsu Itachi possesses, resulting in the margin for error for Minato being very small. He would essentially have to avoid eye contact with him while still being able to track his movements efficiently enough to actually effectively combat him physically. So even if we were to argue Minato is physically superior, that would still be negated by the Genjutsu threat. So Minato would have to evade via Flying Raijin swiftly to avoid Itachi's gaze, which is not in character, as Minato in character will actually look at an Uchiha in the eye, such as Yellow Mask Obito, who he actually thought was Madara. So even someone as dangerous as Madara, he's still willing to look him in the eye, regardless of him being an Uchiha who presents a Genjutsu threat. So hence, Itachi takes this more times than not, with us agreeing he wins this a solid 7 to 8 out of 10 times, with the best hopes for Minato being successfully evading Itachi and potentially blitzing and or off-guarding Itachi with a lethal blow such as a Rasengan. So for you Minato fans are like, what the hell? Just look at it this way. Again, even if you argue that he's physically maybe even superior, it wouldn't be by much. Again, there isn't much empirically to imply that he's just leagues above. That would be negated, again, by the fact that he has to avoid eye contact, that he has to avoid the Genjutsu threat, and you can't fight what you can't see. We all know historically that has to be trained, right? My guy, who is the Taijutsu god, had to train alongside Kakashi to master the ability to look at his feet and still combat him, which is why he didn't get cooked by Itachi in part 1 when he came with Kisame. So keep that in mind. And don't think we're just simply saying Minato is just inferior and one-shot GG. There's more to that, and hopefully we give you, substantiation for that. But now moving on to by far the most popular and debated versions of these two that are regularly matched up in the fandom, Akatsuki Itachi versus Prime Hokage Minato. Now, by far the best way to begin comparing these two legendary shinobi is by getting into the history of one man, Obito Uchiha. Obito Uchiha has an extensive history with both shinobi, which allows us to extrapolate further key power scaling conclusions on both of these combatants. But did you want to get into that a bit first, and how he has a history with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when it comes to Obito interacting with both of these two prodigies of a ninja, with Minato, we blatantly see as, obviously his relationship as sensei and to student. So, he knows very extensive knowledge with him and whatnot. He trained with them. They're practically like family. And then we obviously know what happens in the narrative. Things go wrong, and eventually it ends up in a death battle scenario of student versus master, a theme that we see throughout Naruto a consistent amount of times. Basically, it ends up, in an extremely close battle. Extremely close battle with both, opponents facing similar disadvantages and nerfs, where they're both, being severely nerfed, from stamina and chakra depletion. Obito with the Nine Tails and spamming Kamui, Minato spamming Flying Raijin to protect everybody, and fighting the Nine Tails along with fighting Obito. And they basically have a very competitive battle, and eventually leads to the conclusion of Minato just barely coming out on top due to exploiting blind spots along with in correlation to the Flying Raijin, and that's how he's able to basically become the victor of this situation. Him being a threat to that Obito, very, very impressive. It just establishes, the scaling parameters right there and then. And then on top of it, then you have Itachi into the mix, where this same Itachi, who was just blatantly narratively emphasized to be comparable to Obito and perceived as a threat to Obito. And mind you, this was even beforehand, of Itachi, before he slaughters the Uchiha. There's also that to put into consideration. And so, Obito has always viewed Itachi as a threat. And this is a big deal because we actually consistently, in character, see Obito where if he knows he's that much superior, he will basically just, there's no negotiation, there's no nothing, right? He's demonstrated that with Konan. He's demonstrated that with Kabuto, where he just immediately wanted to kill them, and that's it. He's demonstrated that with the 5 Kage, at the summit, and and so on and so forth. But whenever there's certain individuals that is basically a threat or a risk to him, okay, such as Itachi, he basically won't cross that line. He's a very precautious ninja. Overall, just tons of a narrative emphasis of Itachi being a threat, and that was established from before they slaughtered the Uchiha, and even all the way to the point after Itachi's death. He waited for Itachi to die in order to finally, fully activate the plans for the Akatsuki. He flat out tells Zetsu, that eyesore is no longer here. There's nothing finally standing in my way. Basically there's no limits. Go attack Konoha. We're going to go mess him up. Let's go capture Naruto, right? There was no restraints whatsoever. Before, he couldn't touch Sasuke, he couldn't touch Naruto, he couldn't even do anything to Konoha, okay? Because again, that's how much of a formidable threat Itachi was. And mind you, this is a little bit more crazy because this is technically a more experienced, more senior, older Obito as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Batman said, from what we see empirically between Obito and Itachi and Obito and Minato respectively, we clearly see a difference in respect and overall fear, if you will, of retaliation, so to speak. So with Minato, Obito was willing and confident enough as a teenager to attack Minato's family and village, all while controlling the Nine Tails via his Sharingan. Having such success against Minato that Minato himself believed that the feats Obito accomplished that night could have only been accomplished by Madara Uchiha himself. He literally thought this guy in the mask was the strongest Uchiha to ever live. That's how much respect and sort of esteem he held this guy in, which is insane. So now in regards to Itachi, Obito as an adult deduced that a teenage Itachi was such a threat that he deemed the best course of action was to compromise with him to avoid a one-on-one altercation, literally honoring this compromise, like Batman said, right up until Itachi's death, meaning he even deemed a dying Itachi with an illness as a considerable threat as well. What makes this series of events significant is the fact that Obito historically does not negotiate with anybody he deems inferior, like Batman said, including the literal Kage of the five great nations, because as we all know, at the 5 Kage summit, he literally sat there and told them how he was going to take over the world to their face and basically insinuated there's nothing any of you can do about it. He had no fear, no hesitation, and they all sat there and knew that they couldn't challenge him in that moment. Hence, with these historic events in mind, it is quite clear that he deemed himself superior, or at least relative to Minato, while he deemed himself not powerful enough to challenge an even teenage Itachi, on top of the fact that we see a younger, weaker Obito having a death match with Minato. This would allow us to conclude that Itachi and the Akatsuki was more powerful than Hokage Minato. But with us literally dropping that bombshell of a statement, let's now get into the win-cons for both to hopefully calm the nerves of the Minato stands at least a little bit. But did you want to start out with the win-cons and sort of alleviate the pain of the Minato stands a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Obviously, for Minato, it would just straight up just be ceiling jutsu, you know what I mean? Or just landing a Rising Dawn on Itachi.
Yeah.
Like, that's obviously the only way he's going to take out Itachi accordingly. And Itachi, again, like, he's really strong, and so on and so forth, but he doesn't have... There's no evidence to indicate that his body alone could be able to tank attacks like a Rising Dawn, or Biju bombs and things like that. Again, like there's a whole reason why the Uchiha literally used the Susanoo. Even someone as powerful as Madara utilizes the Susanoo for defensive measures and tanking and so on and so forth, So, like, overall, like, if Minato does land those attacks, most definitely, absolutely, is a one-shot scenario or a kill scenario. As for Itachi, I figured to let you kind of dive into that.
Itachi's just him. He has a considerable amount of win-cons. Obviously, the first and most likely win-con is, of course, his infamous Tsukuyomi, as it all it takes is a glance, as we all know. So basically, as soon as Minato looks at his eyes, he dies, which is in character for him, like we said previously, as he even looked at Obito in the eyes during their altercation. Aside from that, Itachi has Amaterasu, which would be more difficult to land, admittedly, as Minato is one of the more evasive shinobi in the series, and us seeing shinobi such as the 4th Raikage dodge Amaterasu at a very close range. Lastly, he of course has his Susanoo, with his mystical tools such as the Tosca Blade to seal Minato's soul as well. Now, before the Minato stands get out their pitchforks, as I'm sure many of them have, in the comments section, what would be detrimental to Itachi, to give Minato credit, in this matchup would be a prolonged battle. So essentially, the longer the battle were to go on, the greater the odds are for Minato, as Itachi's illness and fatigue issues would deplete him at a much higher rate than someone in their healthy physical prime such as Minato. Hence, after a certain amount of time in battle, the tides would turn for Minato, resulting in him most likely winning the battle. But with all that being said, we did agree that Itachi would win a solid 7 out of 10 times, with again, those odds decreasing the longer the battle were to go on. However, it's in character for both combatants to end the battle quite quickly, and we all know Itachi possesses arguably the best arsenal of one-shot, one-kill abilities. So there you have it for that. But did you have anything else to add to that before we move on to the next fun one here, fun matchup?
Honestly, it's a very good way to analyze it, from being generous to both parties and both sides. It's just, again, like, unfortunately, I would definitely lean towards Itachi more. And, like, is it impossible for Minato to obtain a W? I would absolutely not. He's just as formidable and just as dangerous, but the problem with between these two is, like, the endurance battle or, like, prolonging, like, that is absolutely correct on Jay's side, but the issue is these two characters, they are probably the most cutthroat, bloodlusted, immediately straight to it type ninja.
Facts.
In the face of history. You know what I mean? Like even in comparable to Hashirama and Madara, like they don't play around. They want to immediately end the fight. We consistently see that every single time with them in character. So it's like, regardless of the prolonged one, that like they're not going to do that. They're just going to be very cutthroat, straight to it, and just go for it. And here's the problem. Like, Minato, he's even more ballsy. Like, he likes to really gamble too, which is really not good for him, especially when he's pushed into a corner or whatnot, because when he was having a very, very competitive battle against Obito, he basically just flat out states, oh, it's just get a ball who's just faster than the last second, right? Like, there's no strategy, there's no crazy plan or not. It's just who's just faster, right? And all he did was use Flying Raijin, get to his blind spot right when he materialized, and then land a Rising Gun, and Obito didn't have enough time to respond at the moment, because he's getting attacked from his blind spot and from behind. And, like, with Itachi, that's just not going to work. With someone like him, you can't gamble against someone like him. He's too intelligent. He has so much in his arsenal. The Amaterasu Black Flames to utilize as offense or defensive measures. Then you also have Itachi Susanoo to cover his blind spot, something Obito lacked. Okay, that's also like a direct difference. Point being said is there's a consistent pattern, and problem here where Itachi just has a counter for everything Minato does. That's the issue. In the way Minato fights, how he responds, or even in character of him just gambling when he's really pushed into a corner. He just goes for it, and Itachi can counter in any way, whether if it's Susanoo or an explosive shot. Let's say Minato even marks him, right? And then teleports within the Susanoo. Itachi could use an explosive shadow clone where it's, like, overall, like, this chess match that they're going to play, it's inevitable. You're talking about the two most smartest ninjas in history, right? Like, Itachi just has all the arsenal and jutsu power to just come on top against Minato. From what we do see, and just to be objective to both parties, they're in the same playing field as speed alone. Just their physical speed. Obviously, Minato would be the fastest with Flying Raijin, but I'll let Jay get into this if he wants to talk about it, because I know somebody's going to bring up the Flying Raijin, and therefore that's why Minato wins. If you actually analyze the Flying Raijin, that's not the case either. But I figured to let Jay talk about that really briefly, why that's not really going to create a win-con scenario.
Yeah, so, like Batman alluded to, the Flying Raijin is a multi-step process, right? Because people look at it surface level, they think, instantaneous, instantaneous one-shot kill. No, it's not that simple. There's steps to it. So first, it's activating the jutsu, right? The process of activating it, that is an instant. That is all dependent upon the neurotransmitting speed of a person's brain, right? So Minato doesn't have instantaneous neurotransmitters. He has to activate it. Then the actual ability takes place, which is instant, right? The actual ability itself. But then as soon as he materializes in whatever position he happens to teleport to, what happens next is solely dependent on his reaction speed. So we see a great example with Tobirama versus Minato. He does get out of Madara's attack during the Fourth Great Shinobi War, but as soon as he teleports and materializes behind him, everything after that is dependent upon his reaction speed. What happens? Madara is superior, so he reacts to that. He might not react to the act of teleportation because that's instant, but he can react to the follow-up. So simply put, even if Minato were to use that, Itachi does have, at bare minimum, relative physical prowess to Minato, so that wouldn't matter anyway. Again, Minato stands, hear us out. Just think about this analogy before we go on to the next matchup. Both guys are great, but imagine Minato is a soldier, right, with just a ball and chain, right? The ball and chain, it has high AP. If you get hit by it, you're done. But Itachi doesn't just have a ball and chain. He has a bow and arrow. He has a sword. He has a fucking mace. Like, the guy just has a much wider arsenal, and that's the problem. Like Batman said very well earlier, the margin for error is just smaller for Minato. All he has is a ball and chain, aka Flying Raijin and Rasengan. That's all he has. And when we really boil it down, Yes, he has amazing lore. Yes, he's a legend. Yes, he's one of the most pivotal shinobi in history. But all he has is teleportation and a Rasengan. That's not gonna work against someone that has, at bare minimum,
Yeah,
relative
it just
base
won't.
physical combat ability.
It's not, you
With
don't even gotta touch you. You don't even
Yeah,
gotta touch you.
he doesn't gotta touch you. He can't.
That's
He
the
doesn't need
problem.
to touch.
Minato has to touch you.
It's
Like the
yeah,
problem with Obito and Minato, they gotta touch you,
yeah.
right? You know what I mean?
Like
Itachi
like
don't even
yeah,
gotta
yeah.
do that, man.
Obito had to touch him. He had to grab him. He had to hold him enough to teleport him away. Itachi doesn't need to do that. He can look at you and you're cooked. We know it takes a picosecond. That's even faster than most people's brain processing speed. He might not even know he's defeated. Again, it sounds like we're glazing, but look at it with that analogy I gave you. Minato is a ball and chain soldier. Itachi has a ball and chain too, but he has a sword. He has a mace. He has all these tools.
The Minato narrative, everyone hailed him as a god. It
Exactly.
praised him and what level.
None of those narrative statements are just basically the Sonning or like any other ninja you can think of that are just constantly praising. It's just blatant glaze, guys. Like, and it also makes sense. Like, they know Minato, right? Like, they grew up with him, they trained him, they saw his prowess, whatever. He's a Shadow Kage. Like, that was the whole theme
Literally.
and narrative. Minato was out in the bright spotlight, right? In the savior complex hero. That was the whole narrative. While Itachi is doing all that, but behind the scenes, in the shadow, he was the same capacity, same threat, same potential. So even if he's not getting the same praise, narrative emphasis, again, it's a false equivalence because Minato was eliminated in a different light in comparison to Itachi. Yeah. Itachi was more undercovered, more low-key, while Minato was just, here I am, guys. Like, look at me. I'm that guy, right? And that's why everybody knew about Minato, but nobody didn't really know that about Itachi, right? Except
Different
for
careers.
like Obito or
Yeah.
people that really, it's just different. So like, I wanted to kind of shut that down because I already know somebody will probably be coming out there throwing the argument for that, or and nothing but love, but that kind of came out from Swag Kage because I know he'll bring those narrative arguments out there for him too. But like that can work for a lot of other characters like Kakasu, whatever, blah blah, but not for someone like Itachi. It's not the same.
So so folks, Minato stands again. Just please keep in mind what we said, and just keep in mind the things we have said so far. But going to the last matchup that we have for you guys, we got a less talked about but interesting matchup with Edo Itachi versus Edo Minato. Now, to give a quick recap on the functionality and nature of reanimated shinobi, they are in their physical primes while also essentially being immortal, not being able to actually be eliminated by conventional attacks, and can only be defeated via scaling. Additionally, they have passive chakra regeneration, with them simply having their chakra replenish when they do happen to temporarily exhaust their chakra, such as when Minato during the war stated he needed a moment to regain chakra after high jutsu utilization. So with that being said, how would this go? Well, this is essentially a prime healthy Itachi versus a prime healthy Minato with half of the Nine-Tails chakra inside of him. So jumping straight into the battle, considering we already basically scaled both at or near their primes, the physical prowess debate would not be required here, as Minato would be significantly superior in terms of AP, speed, and durability, making it much easier for him to outspeed and maneuver Itachi and seal him to defeat him. However, the biggest question is how would Itachi's Tsukuyomi affect Minato as an Edo Tensei, since it obviously wouldn't kill him. But Batman, did you want to get into that and how that would most likely affect Minato?
So Itachi has two major big deal win cons. And like what makes Itachi so scary is he's one of those ninja that even when he's finally pushed to a corner or someone is physically more superior than him, he still technically has a way to deal with you accordingly and beat you despite the scaling difference. And as what Jay said with Tsukuyomi, as you all know, it is stated several times that once you're caught in it, there is no escape. Like, you can't combat it because it basically alters time perception, etc., and you can't combat it. It's different from any other genjutsu, where all other genjutsu, you can fight against it, right? And utilize your scaling or whatever, or genjutsu resistance, the whole nine. But with Tsukuyomi, it takes away that factor. So not only can you not defend yourself, it's basically an immediate GG. Okay, and for psychological, mental, fortitude, that is completely different from physical fortitude, right? And overall, like, that could easily be, even if you don't think the Tsukiyomi damage could hurt, like, do anything, because he is an Edo, right? Regardless, he combos that with a Totsuka blade, it's a GG. Because basically, Minato will be sitting there vulnerable, okay, and he can hit him with a Totsuka blade, and that's it. He's sealed right there and then.
Yeah, so like Batman said, Minato not being able to actually die from the Tsukiyomi will result in him simply being caught in the Genjutsu until Itachi runs out of chakra. But the problem is this will give Itachi more than enough time to seal Minato, resulting in his defeat. Additionally, as we've emphasized previously, it is in character for Minato to look Uchiha of prominence in the eye without hesitation, which is again a fatal error against someone with the Genjutsu mastery Itachi has. However, it is the difference in speed regarding both reactionary speed and physical speed, which would make a huge difference for Minato, as he would be able to one-shot Itachi with a high rate of success with one-shot high AP abilities such as a Rasengan and or Bijou bombs, leaving Itachi vulnerable, having to heal from a lethal blow, giving Minato more than enough time to seal him, defeating him in the process, because as we know, when Edos are hurt, or rather damaged significantly, they do have to heal from it, and they almost seem like they can't move, such as when Obito blew up Hashirama and Toriyama in half. Now here comes the most controversial and shocking conclusion of the video with this matchup, which is that Itachi would still win.
What the fuck?
Now, folks, please calm down and allow me to explain. I know it's crazy, but the reason why he can be summarized in... yeah, it sounds like we're glazing, but I can summarize why in one word. Izanagi. Now, hear me out, because Itachi would lose the initial encounter, because of course he's inferior physically, but would Izanagi out of it and would one-shot Minato via the Totsuka, or hit him with the Tsukiyomi and then seal him. And we see weaker shinobi being able to do a similar thing, such as Danzo versus Shishui, where he was able to use Izanagi to gain the upper hand and obviously defeat Shishui and take his eye. So, folks, again, he would be defeated initially. He'd get bodied, yes. All props to Minato. No doubt. He would body his shit. He would bomb him like fucking bombs on Hiroshima in World War II. But the problem is, as soon as he tries to seal him, he will use Izanagi, and at that point, that will give him the time window, the time frame to seal him or Tsukiyomi him and then seal him. We know that's what he's going to do. We know that's in character for him. You can't even argue that Izanagi can't be used as an Edo, because we see him use Izanami against Kabuto as an Edo, so there's no reason to conclude he can't use Izanagi. I know it sounds crazy. But that's the conclusion we came to. And again, we actually didn't even take that into account when we were scripting. We were trying to give Minato something, anything. In fact, this whole entire video, we were trying our hardest to find any Minato glaze.
Yeah,
any
just
Minato
for Minato,
help.
like to give him the W,
we're trying,
like just way more for Minato. But it's like every time we come to something. Like, oh yeah, it's looking great, and it's Itachi can do that. Yeah, oh no, Itachi can do that.
Exactly.
Or he has this. Like Itachi is just he's literally the perfect character to just basically defy the impossible. Like again, we're not sitting here saying he can beat anyone or anything like that either. Like for there's certain people where this strictly wouldn't work. Like Madara wouldn't work because he has Izanagi. Hashirama wouldn't work because he has wood style clones that could even deceive someone like Madara. There's many exceptions to this rule, but Minato doesn't have a get out of jail free card. The moment Minato drops his guard, bam, immediately gets hit by the Totsuka blade. And he's sealed. As crazy as it sounds.
It sounds crazy.
I already know Minato fans are probably screaming, oh no, Minato can't get caught off guard. Like he's a sentry and blah, blah, and all this stuff. He literally gets caught off guard by Obito. Obito literally appears behind him and then grabs him. And mind you, he was in a combat scenario. Like he was staring, like he was like on the statue, like staring at the Ninetales. So he's ready to fight. It's not like he's just chilling in his freaking bathtub or his house with Kushina, Like, he's literally ready to go, and he appears behind him and grabs his arm, and he's like, this battle is over. And then it was because of flying Raijin he was able to escape. But that doesn't work against Totsuka. The moment you get hit by Totsuka, you get sealed. You can't use Jutsu, no nothing. If that was the case, then Orochimaru wouldn't have died, because we know he's the king of reviving and etc. the whole nine,
Evading,
and immortality. And negating things. So, overall, it just... I don't know. I don't know if there's anything really more you
Yeah.
know, you could say it for that,
It's rough.
Jay, but
It's rough. Honestly, with all that being said, we see Itachi actually winning this probably 7 out of 10 times with Minato. Again, Minato's best win con, because it's possible he could win, being simply to quickly seal Itachi before he can even activate Izanagi, which, honestly, again, very
but
unlikely. And we're
here's the problem
trying to
with
give him
that.
credit. We're trying. We're trying.
So that's the problem. Like once you have it on ready to go, that's it. You know what I mean? And I'm sorry, it's completely out of character for Itachi to not have that already on the moment he immediately sees Minato in base. Okay, in base, they sees him. He'd be like, "Yeah, this guy is really fucking powerful. Like, I need a, yeah, I gotta activate it because my only
Yeah.
way of winning is this scenario. You know, like, and
Yeah.
that's just what he would do. Like, that's just blatantly in character for Itachi. He would do whatever it takes to win at all cost. You know,
Yeah,
and
and
he
that's
has
just
that capability and that hacks to do
yeah,
so.
and that's just what it is. And there you guys have it, folks. That is the video. I do think this matchup and the way it would play out is a great illustration of how styles make fights. As while Minato is extremely physically gifted, that is greatly negated by the one-look, one-shot ability and arsenal of Itachi, as he doesn't even need to touch you to win the battle decisively. Anyways, please feel free to leave any comments or thoughts down below. And please, if you find any logical argument to give Minato more glaze or higher probabilities, please do so, because we try. I'm dead ass. We tried our best. I tried many days. I tried my best, but again, styles make fights, and this is just a great illustration of that between two prodigal shinobis. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and we will see you in the next video. Stay classy.
There you go. Peace.